every bit of carbon that we use in the world, how do we make each joule of carbon or each unit of carbon last as long as possible and be as useful for as long as possible? So, I mean, in a way, the classic Dieter Rams way, the first thing is to make things last a long time. That might be to do with trends, because if you make a trendy object, it becomes obsolete. So we've always had this debate around fashion and trend and whether we're inside it or outside it. And of course, we're affected by trend, but we try not to design for the moment. It has to be timely and timeless at the same time, almost. You know, it has to be relevant to the moment, but also long-lasting, which is quite a tricky thing to do. But so well-made objects that are fit for purpose, you know, not too much material, but then the whole repairability cycle of how do you refurbish and how do you make, you know, especially on upholstered furniture, how do you give it second, third, fourth life? There was a project in London just this year with a big tech company, and in the tender, it was no new furniture. So they requested that you couldn't come to the tender with a new piece of furniture. It had to be reconditioned or repurposed or repaired from a second life. And that was probably a political statement in a way about circularity, because it's saying what's, you know, how do we take care of the materials that we're given and that we're using? And it's actually stimulating a whole new culture of repair and refurbishment as a second industry, a bit like how, you know, you can get someone to do new shop fronts or door fronts for your IKEA kitchen. There's now layers of repair servicing going on in the contract industry in different cities, and I think we think in 10 years' time that will be an absolute standard part of how we design, or what we design for.
In terms of the design process, we are continually talking to our clients about the circularity that's potentially going to be built into that product portfolio or the product, and trying to work out with them, if we build it in this way, we get this outcome. And if we build it in this way, we get another outcome. And sometimes we realize that, you know, we're doing things just because it's easy and it's the way we've done things before. And as you were asking the question, I was thinking about cold cured foam, you know, where we inject a foam over a steel armature and we get a lovely form factor out of it. I hate that phrase, but, you know, we get a nice shape. Often those shapes are difficult to upholster, so you end up stapling them, which means they really have to go back to the manufacturer to be upholstered. But if the foam gets damaged, the product is pretty much over, because it's a singular entity. And then you can't get the foam off the steel armature without sort of cutting it off. So they often just end up in landfill. Now, that's, in some ways, that's only being driven by an aesthetic ambition. So as soon as you put that sort of sequence of problems into the design pot, you end up with a different set of outcomes as the solution. If you say, I don't want to have that problem as the end result, then you don't have that in the design solution. You're just not going to end up with that product. So it's an interesting dilemma, because the question is that holding us back aesthetically, or does it just change the culture of aesthetics?
The last couple of years, we've been doing a whole lot of research into higher education as a market for furniture. At the same time as the circularity idea, we've been looking at the repairability just from a maintenance perspective in that education sphere. And it's stimulating new types of product response from us, so that we get rid of glue and stapling and any co-molded materials. Funny enough, I was just thinking, Luke, that the womb chair and the egg chair and the swan chair have got a lot to answer for, because designers ever since have been trying to mimic that kind of form factor of which is often a glued textile onto a foam molding.
And the problem with furniture, for example, is it's fundamentally super, super cheap. The true value, the true cost of the things that we're buying is not reflected in the cost of the product. What we're buying is a temporary access to that material base. But in 50, 60 years' time, when there aren't enough raw materials in the ground and we're scavenging on the surface, then the value of items will be completely different. We're still in this sort of industrial era where it's just too cheap to get the raw materials out of the ground. And we still have a capitalist system based on I'll be competitive if I can make it cheaper than my next competitor. So we're having an exhibition called Change Making in London at LDF, and it's really a reflection of the last 25 years of us being active designers and trying to understand, first and foremost, what is influencing our design work and how those influences have changed our points of view and also the outcomes, and how that changes what we're reflecting on what we will be doing in the future.
And there's a kind of basic polarity between people and planet. Those are the two themes we're looking at, which between behavior around people and making around planet. And we're trying to understand that sort of duality and how they overlap and inform each other in our process.